Today, we're diving into one of ancient Rome's biggest mysteries. We're going to talk about a group of priests who didn't just bend the rules of gender, they shattered them. And it turns out a very modern idea might be the key to finally figuring them out. So let's get into it. Okay, so picture ancient Rome. You're probably thinking of soldiers, senators, a society built on tradition and some seriously strict ideas about what it meant to be a man. Now imagine this. Right in the middle of all that, there's a group of religious figures who defy that entire system in the most public and spectacular way you can imagine. And this, right here, is where we find a genuine historical puzzle. Who were these people, the Galli, and how in the world did they fit into Roman society? So let me introduce you to the Galli. These were priests of the goddess Cybele, a really powerful deity who was officially brought into the Roman religion. But here's the thing, they were unlike any other priests. They were assigned male at birth, but as a key part of their devotion, they castrated themselves. And from then on, they wore women's clothing, like the stola, a dress specifically for respected Roman wives. They grew their hair long, and they wore heavy makeup. For the Roman elite, they were just this shocking foreign spectacle. It just leaves you with this huge question, right? How are we supposed to think about them? Were they trying to become women? Were they just seen as failed men? Or, and this is the interesting part, were they creating a totally new identity, something that was neither male nor female? The Romans themselves had no idea what to do with them. On the one hand, the Galli were part of an official state religion. But on the other hand, their very presence was seen as this huge public violation of everything Rome stood for. And check out this quote from a historian back then. The Senate actually passed a law forbidding Roman citizens from becoming Galli. But listen to what he points out. The public procession, the loud music, and specifically the multicolored stola. It was the clothing that was a huge part of the problem. It was a visual attack on their sense of order. To put it simply, the writers and thinkers of Rome's upper class saw the Galli as a total violation of what we might call Romo-normativity. You know, the super strict social and gender rules of the day. The fact that they had these altered male bodies but wore female clothes created this clash that was just unacceptable. And boy, did they get described with a lot of mockery and disgust. But here's a thought. What if we've been looking at this all wrong? What if, to really get the Dama Galli, we need to use a tool that feels incredibly modern? What if we need to think about them through the lens of drag? Now hold on. When we say drag here, we're not just talking about someone trying to impersonate a woman. We're using a much deeper definition. Think of drag as a performance that deliberately uses clothing to mess with our expectations, to highlight the gap between a person's body and a person's social role. It's using clothes to make a statement about identity itself. Here's a perfect way to think about it. A firefighter's uniform, right? It's not just clothes. It screams social role. It tells you who they are and what they do. Well, drag takes that concept and has fun with it. It plays with the uniform to explore the very idea of what a firefighter is. And that's where this brilliant idea of a third term comes in. The idea is that drag doesn't just switch from one box, male, to another box, female. Instead, it creates this third space, a space that doesn't fit in either box. And by not fitting, it makes you question why the boxes even exist in the first place. It blows up the whole binary system. Okay, so let's take this idea, this third term, and go back to the Galli. How does looking at them as performers of drag totally flip the script on what they were doing? Just look at this comparison. When you see cross-dressing in Roman myths, like the hero Achilles hiding out as a girl, the whole point is deception. It's temporary, and the goal is always to eventually come back and be even more of a man. But the Galli? It's the complete opposite. Their motive wasn't to hide, it was to display. Their change was permanent. And their goal wasn't to pass as women, but to create a brand new, stable identity for everyone to see. This is the absolute key. Their feminine clothes were not a disguise to make you forget they were assigned male at birth. No, they were a display, meant to draw attention to that fact. The whole point was to show off the contrast and reveal their new non-binary reality. It was a uniform for their unique identity. And get this, an ancient writer actually described their initiation ritual. It is wild. But listen to how clothing frames the entire experience. Step 1, he publicly throws off his male clothes. Then comes the irreversible act of castration. And what's the final step? He's given women's clothing from a random house in the city. The entire transformation is bookended by a change of clothes. So think about what that means. The clothing becomes a living symbol of the castration. Every single day that Aeolus puts on that stola, he was basically re-performing the act that made him who he was. Their drag wasn't a one-time show. It was a constant, daily performance of their permanent, in-between identity. So what's the big takeaway here? How does seeing Galli in this new light change how we think about the past, and maybe even about ourselves? Well, here's why this matters so much. It totally reframes a Galli. They're no longer just these passive, confusing figures. Suddenly, you see them as active agents, people who are consciously and carefully building a stable third identity for themselves. They weren't confused or lost between genders. They were constructing their own. It also shows us that clothes don't just reflect reality, they can actually create it. And maybe most importantly, it's pretty stunning proof that complex non-binary identities aren't some new invention. They existed and were incredibly visible, even in ancient Rome. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The Galli used their clothes to perform an identity, to make a powerful statement about who they were. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Every single morning when we get dressed, what identities are we performing? What roles are we playing? All without even thinking about it.